My man, Erik Simins.
Nice to be here, man. And him and his Clooney's came. There's about 10 in his posse, right? They had the ghetto blaster on their shoulder. You're dead this year, man.
You told me like 5 years ago. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a musician. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
It's intimidating.
Eric, do you mind shaving my back? I got to get on show tomorrow. I'm like,
it's a humbling. Get you, Simmons.
I just did the old Neo, and I was like, no. He's like, you're too fat to be a bartender. You can go on door.
So you get sued.
Yes.
You get through that.
And the grosser they were, the better.
What is the cost of a mishire?
You're like, get out of there. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel good, man.
Good way of explaining it.
Yeah. So,
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence.
My man, Erik Simins. Buddy, thank you for coming on today. Absolute pleasure.
nice to be here, man.
I'm excited. We got a cool story. I think let's start with you and I. I had to look back last night, digging through emails. 2014, end of the year. EO, you joined our forum group. We had been together maybe a couple years, a few of us. And man, 10 years later.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey with our EO forum group. We've made some lifelong friendships, I think. And, I'd say anyone who hasn't got a peer group, particularly entrepreneurs, it could be a pretty stressful place, right? Sometimes your significant other, your parents, best friends, they don't quite get what it is we go through. Sleepless, sweat-filled nights. Am I going to make payroll? Like all the hard times. It's nice to have a group of guys and girls that can relate to what it is you go through as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot with especially younger entrepreneurs that haven't joined some of those groups, whether it's EO, YPO. There's a ton of industry-specific ones, but I think there's so much value in 10 years plus. Our group is not formally part of EO anymore, but we still have the same structure. It's confidentiality, trust, people that can support you and challenge you. And I think that's been one of the cool things, people that can call out your bullshit.
And I think that groups evolve depending on the members of the group. And I think that ours has really evolved around the health and well-being of our group as a priority, right? So we begin the meetings with a one-word open, right? And if 5 or 6 of the people have feeling joyous, and then 1 or 2 people are depressed or stuck.
Or
in
then pain, whatever.
Yeah, the group will focus more on giving them the attention they need. And I can tell you, over the 10 years, whenever I'd open with a challenging word or something that I was having difficulty with, I always left that meeting feeling better, right? And that's a powerful thing to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm proud that we've kept is the whole feedback component only coming from experience, right? Which is really hard because it's so easy. I think anyone can give advice, be like, "Well, Erik, you should just do that," or "Here's what I did." But when you have to stop and go, "Okay, I got to share an experience, something I went through. I can't give advice," and it really forces you to go, "Okay, maybe it's just the feeling I want to talk about, or a similar situation." And the other piece is being in that room, just sitting there, watching the other 4 or 5, and the value not saying a thing is so big. I mean, I walk away from every meeting with 2 pages of notes, reflection, things I want to implement or things I learned, and I think it's been so powerful.
Agreed.
It's cool, Dan. Okay, so we're here to talk about you.
Okay.
Let's go back. Tell me about growing up, and maybe just start with what are some of your fondest memories?
Oh man. Well, a little bit about myself. I'm still working on that in terms of experiencing joy in my life. Yeah. I didn't get much of a childhood, to be honest. It was a pretty rough childhood growing up. Came from a abusive household, split family. Never had contact with my father when I was a kid, and left you kind of feeling one piece short. the whole time. So, I was always striving, and who knows my makeup in terms of what's driven me to accomplish what I've accomplished today. But that's definitely a part of it. And so I'd say my childhood wasn't filled with a lot of kind of playtime or a lot of being able to relax. I remember going to counseling because I had a really bad temper as a kid. A place called The Crush that my mom put me in because she couldn't handle me. Oh, and they said the first diagnosis was your child has no idea how to play. Right. So when my mom came in the room, my dad taught me how to play poker when I was like 3 years old. And so,
crazy.
And so by like 4 and 5, my math skills were pretty good. And so I was beating these guys at poker at like 5 years old.
What?
And that's how I knew how to play, was to kind of compete and be super competitive. And that was my childhood.
You had to, I'll say, like, get hard, or like, some of that rougher experiences growing up, you had to find ways to protect yourself. One of the things you and I talked about was you getting into boxing early on and fitness. Tell me about that and how that helped you along the way early on.
So the boxing part was definitely a self-protection thing because I had a bully in high school, and this guy was, I won't name him, but on his first day of school, I think he came to our school in grade 10. There was like the toughest guy in our school, which was in grade 13, because we had grade 13 at that time. That dates us a little bit.
Was you Lee side?
Lee side, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this grade 10, like, just beat the living hell out of this grade 13 person. And he was a boxer. And I was best friends with his soon-to-be girlfriend, and he didn't like that. So he used me as a punching bag for a good couple years. Like bad punching bag, like hospital punching bag. Like this guy took it. And so I was terrified of going to school for a couple years. And, I tried to be friends with him. I tried to kind of manipulate the situation with everything I knew how to do just to get him to stop, and nothing would stop him. And so my only choice was learn how to box. So I picked the roughest boxing gym in Toronto, which was in Regent Park, Newsboys. And I went there, and I made friends with the coach, the head coach there, and I boxed for free for my entire career.
Did that head coach take you under his wing?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I think it was in grade 13, so in my last year OAC, because it had switched from 13 to OAC, and he did the typical intimidation tactic. We were all playing volleyball, and there was a track above the volleyball court, and him and his Clooney's came. There's about 10 in his posse, right? They had the ghetto blaster on their shoulder. All white guys, by the way, and had the ghetto blaster on their shoulder. Like, yeah, you're dead this year, man. And
you, Simins.
I just did the old Neo, and I was like, no. No. He's like, what?
Triumphant moment.
Yeah. Well, that was. I'm like, everyone on the volleyball team, I'm like, you guys, you better follow me home because I know he's coming with his posse and he's going to be at my house and he'll just destroy me. So
that's scary.
And so that was it. That was all the training that I had done and everything that, and I had no idea because I've been working out for, I guess, 3 years at that point. So I had no idea how strong I was. And when it came to actually fighting him, I destroyed him. And they had to pull me off. And I don't remember much of it other than he never bothered me again. Right. And that was kind of like, I think that was a quintessential moment in like the years of training that went into it. And, but I mean, my motivation was fear. And I'd love to talk about that too, in terms of what motivates people, because fear is not always a bad motivator. Sometimes it can push you past things. Right. And one of my mentors always told me, do it afraid. Right. And so if you're afraid, it doesn't mean you got to stop. Right. So I have a really high risk profile. If you look at my investments and you look at my business choices, and, fortunately I found someone to balance that out. My wife, Heather, married 10 years. And
congratulations.
That's kind of an amazing accomplishment because in high school I was voted most likely to bring a date to your wedding. So the fact that, 70% of my grad class are divorced and I'm still together with Heather means I made the right choice, and I was ready.
I appreciate you sharing that. At what point where was the desire and drive to have a family? You've got 2 beautiful kids. 6 and 4. Sorry, give me the ages.
Yeah, 7 and 4 now.
7 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
An incredible family and relationship with your wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you had? I mean, with your experience growing up, did you say like, this is what I want? I saw what I didn't want, and that was a big driver for you.
It's interesting because I think learning can happen two ways, right? It's by positive example, and it's also by negative example, things you don't want. So I think in my childhood, there was a lot of negative examples that I learned from. And I think, going through the process with my father and realizing, coming to some reconciliation with him at the end of his life, realizing that none of that was his fault, right? That was the stuff that was bestowed upon him, that was bestowed upon his father and generations before. So a real motivation for me with my family is to undo that generational pain, intergenerational pain that was bestowed upon my lineage in the past of alcoholism and abusiveness. And I have succeeded as a father and as a family member if I can just erase that part of the ongoing cycle that's going to continue with my children. But obviously there's so much more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's not even erasing, it's identifying, hey, this is what I'm changing and for generations to come too. So I think that's incredible work. You mentioned alcohol. It was obviously a part of some of the earlier party days and having fun. But how did that impact your life?
Badly. My dad used to, would say that, to my mom and seeing like he would pass out with a 40 a Jack on either side of the couch so that when he woke up, it would be there, right? When he woke up from his pass out. And I never thought I could be there or go there, but I did go there. And it was during the time when I was in the music industry. It was like I made the conscious decision. I had some money saved up. I was really ambitious in my early 20s. I had a condo, was buying another condo, worked in the pharmaceutical space. And my stepdad, who was an amazing man, that my mom remarried. And initially as a kid, I thought, he's a nerd, right? And it's like I saw, football dad and throw all that stuff around. But over time, as I matured, I realized what an incredible human being he is and what a positive impact he had in my life. And
how old were you at that point when you realized that?
University. Okay. Yeah. So on our way to university. Yeah. Sorry, what were you chatting about?
So the alcohol piece and the party stage and realizing that, this is, again, it's one of those things where you didn't want to go that route, but all of a sudden now you find yourself going down that path. Yeah.
Well, it's whether it's a genetic thing or a learned behavior, I think it's probably a combination of both. Yeah. But I think it's 10% of everybody kind of has this switch in them where when you get a little bit of a drink, you need more, right? You need more. And if you let that thing run unmonitored, it blows out of control. And in the music industry, that was the perfect place for me to do it, right? Because I could drink in the morning, I could drink before gigs, I could drink before the studio, I could drink at the after parties. It was like nonstop for like 2 or 3 years. Where at the end of it, I thought, okay, so I'll just get out of the music industry and I'll get back to my regular life. But, my first job back, I got fired in 3 months, and that had never happened to me. And it was because they didn't know what was wrong with me, or something was off, right? And it was the fact that I was drinking at lunchtime, right? Because I couldn't not go a day without drinking. And around 11:30, I'd take off early for lunch, and I'd pound a couple pints.
And at this point, it's physical response. Like you have to do it to keep going.
It was a physical and psychological addiction here, but physical, like where I'd get shakes on a daily basis. And so, I realized, okay, so it wasn't the music industry. I'm alcoholic, right? And that's a really big thing to say for the first time. Where you go to those decrepit church basements and you see a bunch of people and you're like, this is where I am, right? And there's a moment of truth before that happens where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't like who I am, right? How did I get to where I am today? Yeah. And that was a scary place. And I'm like, I can't beat this thing. I don't know how. No amount of will is going to allow me to stop because I tried everything.
And you had a track record of succeeding at
Yeah.
everything you did, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, if
That one beat me,
the
man.
attitude of I can beat this just didn't work, man.
And that's one of the things they say in like the program is surrender. You have to give up. Like that is your master, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still deathly afraid of if I ever took a drink. And I think that's a good fear, right? That's a good fear for me to have because everything that I've worked towards and the relationships and the success in business would be undone pretty quickly, I think, if I took a drink. So that ain't in my cards for today, right? For today. Just one day.
A proud moment last meeting that was at your house and going up and you were touring us through after you got all the furniture in and that case in your bedroom in the closet that has the 3 coins. I mean, that's so powerful. So how many years sober now?
Almost 17 years.
It's incredible, man.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks, buddy.
Love it. So let's go back to the fear. How has that been super helpful then from a career standpoint? So, and maybe go back, so high school, you're going through all this, you get great marks, great grades, you're getting into kinesiology, physiology, you're doing well in school, and then what's your first gig out?
Oh, so first gig was kind of part-time during university. There was 3, there's 4. I like to make money. So my 4 jobs in university was working for ProLab, which is now Allmax. So ProLab was a health nutrition company. And so I did worked with a lot of the pro bodybuilders that they sponsored. That was a riot, just working with those guys kind of like before the competition. This guy, Sean Davis, awesome guy, British guy, like Mr. UK, Mr. Universe.
Come on.
He's like, Eric, do you mind shaving my back? I got to show my... I'm like...
It's a humbling rookie move position. Yeah.
It just like the amount of juice that they're on and what they eat. It's like,
oh, no.
Right? But he
no
was
chance he could reach his back.
No. Oh, my God. He's like, a gentle giant. But that was the one. Another job I had was
That's awesome.
Personal trainer. So I did that all through school and worked in Toronto. I ended up landing an amazing job in Toronto with like a boutique personal training firm called Healthy Habits. And that company had like celebrities or A-listers kind of on their roster and a lot of like very successful people like Erica M. Remember her, the video jockey from Much Music?
I don't, but...
Okay. So just like kind of like the Toronto, like...
I also didn't have cable in Owen Sound, so I wasn't on my 4 channels. Sorry.
So it was cool because I got to go into these like neighborhoods I never had exposure to, like Forest Hill and Rosedale, and train these like super like wealthy people in their houses. And that for me was like, sure, I can do it, but these people want more of like, they want to tell their friends they have a personal trainer and they don't really want to get healthy, or they kind of do, but they're not willing to do the work. So I was like, this really ain't for me.
Okay.
And then in university, I was much bigger than I am now, like fat and muscle. So I was over like about 205 pounds, 210 pounds, beefy boy. And so I thought, hey, I'll bartender. That's good money. So I went to this place called the Crowbar at Mac, and I walked in. And I said to the manager, hey, man, I want to be a bartender. He's like, you're too fat to be a bartender. You can go on door.
You're a bouncer.
So I was a bouncer for a year, and then having like a physiology background and using my body as a bit of a science experiment, I got super lean in my last year, and I'm like,
were you at one point where like, fuck you, I'll be behind the bar next year?
Yeah. So my last year I was behind the bar, right?
Okay,
I got like fit and lean, but being having a boxing background and a bit of a anger issue, being a doorman was a pretty cool job too.
It's a pretty good doorman job and title and like background to have. So
yeah.
So then first gig out of school.
ProLab kind of continued on for maybe like 6 months or a year, and then I got into pharmaceuticals. And for me, I thought, this is it, right? Because pharma back in those days, there was no real catch to your spend that you had to be able to market your products. So
this is the heydays where marketing dollars are flowing everywhere.
Just ridiculous. Like I think for my lowest product, which was like angiotensin 2 receptor inhibitor, I think it was like $30,000 was my marketing budget. And then for my top one, Panaloc, which is a gastrointestinal, like a GERD product, right? Proton pump inhibitor. that was like 60 or 80 grand, right? So like 100 grand where I could go and take these docs to dinner, take them golfing. So I got real good at golf, like, because I'd go every Wednesday, Friday for like the 2 years I was in pharma.
You got to be where they're at, right?
Yeah. And it was a riot, but I was ambitious, and I had a conversation with the manager a couple of times, did everything to kind of put the steps in place. He's like, you just gotta be patient. You just gotta pay your dues. Like, I need you in this role for like 2.5, 3 years, and then we can promote you. And I'm like, I ain't waiting.
Yeah.
Right.
Not a fit.
Yeah. And never realize I'm never a fit for corporate, but it took a few experiences for that.
So you get into recruiting after that. What was that role?
So that was after the music industry, right?
Okay, hang on. Let's talk about music. I'm going to cue up this video, which I don't know. I think you told me like 5 years ago. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a musician. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I mean, I've heard you sing casually, play piano, dude. You're super talented. But this video I'll cue up, which I just loved. Like, you're a stud. You're a star.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Long time ago, man.
What a voice. This is 2004.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. I love it. On Spotify, Erik Simins. You can find him. Plug there.
Yeah.
So you go from music and then all of a sudden into recruitment at that point.
Yeah. Well, that lined up with my recovery.
Okay.
And so the cool thing about it is that I met Heather that first year I started recruiting. And so Heather had never seen me and has never seen me taking a drink, right? Wow. So it's like this whole new life that started when that happened. And so, I started in recruitment. I had interviewed because I had no intention of being a recruiter. I just wanted to get back into medical sales because that's what I knew. Yeah. And, 3 out of the 4 agencies are like, you got to be a recruiter, man. You know the science, you can sell all this. So I chose one of them, and it was National Resource Partners, Jeff Curry, Kevin Desjardins, and Steve Sampson. The old dogs of recruitment, right? And
this is one of the bigger firms at the time?
No, they were a small boutique firm.
Okay.
Yeah. And, they took me under their wing, and they kind of showed me the ropes. And again, I was ambitious, and I said, look, if I can achieve these things, I want to be a partner. And, I was their top guy for maybe the last 3 years there. They promised me, that carrot kept going further and further away. And I said, okay, I'm going to go do it myself in 2011. And I think it was like 11 months and like 3 weeks, they served me my paper, they sued me for $1 million. And so I hadn't really... They give me just enough time.
It? Like, did you think it was coming?
No.
It was piss and vinegar. I'm doing my own thing. I'm on cloud 9.
Yeah. I had never been sued before, and that's a scary thing when you get served, right? The first time. I mean, it's happened several times since. I think a lot of entrepreneurs will tell you if you haven't been sued, you haven't made it yet. But I think I was 30, maybe 29, 30 years old. And my business, I think we did $1 million in our first year, right, of revenue. So they waited just enough time to make sure that they could get a crack at every penny that I had made, right?
And make it sting.
Yeah. And so it was a scary time, but...
Who'd you lean on at that point? What was your resource to help?
It's our now godmother, Carla Parente. So... I also love building and construction and architecture. So Carla had been a friend of mine since I was maybe 17, 18 years old. She was a retailer at like CIBC, and she ended up growing into a financial planner, and she's grown with my finances, with us. And through the relationship, she's now my children's godmother.
Wow.
But I lived with Carla at that time. So she's like, she had always had a roommate, and I lived in Toronto downtown, and Carla was in the West End in Etobicoke, and that's where NRP's office was. So she's like, do you want to move in with me? And I said, well, your house, it was like a 40-year-old house. It needs a lot of work. She's like, if you do the work, you can live rent-free.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it was an amazing relationship. She also loves to cook.
Take you under her wing a bit at that time? Because you're a few years sober, but there's an element of mentorship there too.
Yeah. She did. And she's like my stepdad, just an amazing human being. And that's what I need, right? because I've got all this kind of like built-in like non-compassion. Like my favorite saying for a while was, pain is weakness leaving the body, right? And I lived by that for a long time, right? And you've seen how I used to train, right? When I was training a lot.
Dude,
like,
that time in Prague, we went to a gym. First time I saw you train, I was like, wow, I don't want to be here. Yeah. It's intimidating.
I just, for some reason, I still equate pain to success, right? And that's something that I've had lots of coaches, and I know you've had lots of coaches too. We're familiar with Phil, good old Phil McKernan.
Phil McKernan,
and
the Irish man.
You know,
love him.
He was able to pinpoint. He's a ninja when it comes to detecting like what's your deepest rooted issue is, right? And he's like, I think in 3 minutes you have me like in the fetal position, crying like a baby, right? He's like, oh, you like pain, do you? Oh, okay, hit me again. It's okay, Eric. Like, go ahead, just keep hitting you. Yeah, is that what you like? And I'm like, I'm like, yes, Phil, it is.
This is beautiful town. I'm making everyone cry in 3 minutes and knowing their deepest secrets. It's like, how did you know all that? You just met us.
Oh yeah, he's a psychic.
He's incredible.
Yeah, man.
So you get sued. You get through that.
Yep.
And tell me about, the recruiting business, and then I want to talk about Workwolf, because that was sort of an extension of it.
Mm-hmm. So Magnus, we were always looking. So in a perm staffing business, which is what ours was, specializing in the medical business, you're really training your sales, you're training your recruiters to basically do what it is you do, right? And so I'd have several people go out and try to do what we've done, because if you're good at what you do, you make it look easy, right? And so they'd try, they'd go, they fail, but I'd lose them. So I saw the recruiting business, it has perpetual turnover in perm recruitment. So I thought, how do we actually make this into a recurring revenue stream? And so 2015-16, we started looking at contracting and landed our first contracting client, I think in 2016 with Johnson & Johnson. And then we had all of the right infrastructure established for contract recruitment when COVID hit. And so I was on the commercial board of the Ontario Long-Term Care Association.
Okay.
And so the CEO and I had become friends, and she had called me in this time of need and said, look, I need 100 nurses like tomorrow, Eric. Can you help us out?
Wow.
And I said, let me check. And so I called.
I'll get back to you.
I called my recruiting team, and I won't say it here, but they were like, give it to us, right? And
wow.
And so they took on the challenge. We took on the challenge, and I think we had like 50 deployed in the first couple of weeks, and like we were able to fulfill that need. And that was the beginning of like really the takeoff of our contracting position, right? So
sort of no looking back at that point.
No. So like we've actually sunset our perm business. So as of last year, that we no longer do that. I mean, there's a few clients that still really love what it is we did and want to work with us, and we've maintained those, but we don't take on any new business in perm, and we just continue to expand our contracting business. And it's been a crazy ride, right? To think, what it is today, looking back even 5 years ago. I mean, you were with me in the forum. The forum heard, in the EO forum, heard firsthand the challenges that I had, right? And just how tough it was for a long time, right? In terms of like, we were bleeding cash, right? We didn't have enough money to like make payroll, had to take out like a second mortgage, like all the things that you hear. I just like to say that luck has you got to have luck, but you also have to take risk. And so, I got my dream car maybe about 6 months ago, and someone saw me and they're like, what do you do for a living? And I said to them, I take risk for a living, right?
So true. I remember a couple instances when you were like hanging on by a thread. Mm-hmm. And one of those was 2018. You've then launched and built and literally traveled the world with a tech-based company that's servicing, called Digital Passport. I want you to talk about that. But you've got these two things that are, arguably failing or draining cash. Mm-hmm. And, at that point, it could have gone either way.
Yeah. One of our investors early on in Workwolf, which was blockable at the time because it was a blockchain technology-based platform, he'd said, yeah, you're bankrupt. Like, pack it in. Like, you're not coming back from where you're at, right? So at that one point where Workwolf was, we were like, we had $300,000 in receivables that we would never get because we had no product. We literally had chicken scratches on a napkin that the CIO at the time had no idea actually how to build. We had hired a team with my co-founder at the time of 16 people, where our burn was like $200,000 a month, and we had no revenue. We had no product. I'm like, and we had only raised $775,000 in our first kind of like
4 months
friends and family round. Yeah, and I'm like, I came back because I was going to all of the conferences because blockchain was so new at that time. There was no experts, like maybe one in Canada, two in Canada. So going to all these conferences and trying to learn what I could and raise capital along the way.
And this is after crypto had gone like this and like this.
Exactly.
And
yeah. I'm
down at one of the low points,
right in the middle of it. Yeah. So everyone is, they don't understand that distributed ledger is not crypto, right? So it was like something that was a really exciting and new technology at the time became like faux pas. Don't talk about it like it's bad, right?
Sure.
And so the idea was, and I had seen this time and time in recruitment, the idea was, how do we make the information that's on a resume more truthful, and how do we make the data more accurate? Because that's still the main thing that people are looking at when they're making a decision on whether or not they move someone forward to a pre-screen or an interview. And a lot of the times these corporations are getting 200-300 resumes per job posting. And that's a lot of material to go through and try and decipher whether or not that information is truthful or accurate or verified, right?
So you get to see this firsthand as experience in the recruitment side, where like what percentage of people are falsifying information on a resume? So
if you combine accuracy and you combine falsification or like, embellishment, you're looking at more than half resumes are not good data to actually make a decision on.
You start to look at what that's costing a company, like internally or outsourcing. Crazy.
You don't have to make the mishires that are made today, right? Because people make decisions based on what their own biases and their own guts are telling them, and then on what the candidate is telling them, or hopefully what a reference is telling them. But references are really hard to validate as well. So we added to the tech, we added psychometric profiling that gets to the core DNA of somebody in terms of their motivational profile, what makes them tick. And that's part of that digital work passport as the first credential within that. So you can get a real look inside that person's makeup in terms of how they're hardwired, what their comfort of conflict is, what their motivational profile is, what their analytical skills are. These are all things that you can look at where it's data-driven versus kind of bias-driven or gut-driven. And so it's really helped. But back to the turmoil of 2018. So that was just one company, right? So I'm like, we have to fire everybody. When I was traveling all over the world for 6 months, we hired a CEO, and that CEO basically deep sixed the company within a 6 month period. So I came back and both companies were in shambles. And that, getting through that, where you've got one big idea that you want to launch, and you've got investors that are now saying, "Where's my money? Like, you can't close this thing down," or like, "I'll sue you for everything you're worth."
Sure.
That's not a little recruiting company that's suing me for $1 million. It's like a billionaire investor out of New York who's like, "I have the #1 law firm in Manhattan on a $500,000 retainer, and if you don't put your shit together right now and figure this out, I'm taking you to the cleaners." So that's when I called Heather like right away, and I'm like, "House is going in your name. Everything's going in your name."
Jeez, I remember though. But how did you sleep at night? I know for a while you didn't.
You know my sleep patterns, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I'm proud you get your 8 hours now. But what was it like getting through that?
Sleeping was something that, and for
just
a while.
Managing the stress too.
Let's just say it's like you get calloused, right? So over a while, you build a tolerance. Just like the human animal is such an incredible evolved thing. You will build a tolerance to anything. And I'd say, look, there's people who have been through 1,000 times worse than me, and they've come out the other side, right? So it's a matter of just another thing that Barry, one of my mentors, used to tell me was, when you're going through hell, what do you do, right? Do you stop? Because you'll burn up. Or do you keep going, right? So he's like, if you're going through hell, or keep going, keep doing the next right thing that's in front of you. And, you know, I lived that for a lot of years, right? Get into that office. No one's in the office. It's 7:00 at night. You're all alone. It's 4,500 square feet. The lights are out and you're like, what am I doing here? Right? Man. Is this what, am I done? Right?
How much of that I won't fail and that fear got you through that?
I don't know if it's I won't fail. That's not what motivated me. It's I love solving problems, right? And so I'm like, there's got to be a way out of this, right? Yeah. There's got to be a way. Now, whether it's just grit, you just go and you just figure it out as you go, or you don't stop and things will present themselves to you and you grab onto them when they come. You know, I just did that. You know, and things slowly started to piece themselves back together. And we ran really lean for a long time. I didn't take a pay for like, I don't know how long, right? Yeah. And not just not taking a pay, but putting money into a company so that my people could get paid, so that all my best people and my loyal people, you know, I've got people that are with me at Magnus who've been there since, you know, 2013, 2014.
Wow.
And they've been through the ups and the downs. And the beautiful thing about it now is I can reward them for that loyalty, right? So they stuck it out, and now they're making ridiculous money, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they're happy.
How important was Heather in all those years?
Don't make me bawl, man. Don't make me bawl.
It's my job. Could you have done that without a partner?
No, not a chance.
Let alone a partner that's that supportive.
Not a chance. Yeah. So, yeah. And I think that, you know, beside every great man, not that I'm a great man, but it may look that way on the outside if you look at all the things, right? There's a great woman, and you know she's the backbone of family. She's my consciousness. If ever I'm making big business decisions, if there's someone I need to do business with, I'll do the Heather test, right? Which is we go and have dinner, and it's like Heather's very intuitive, right? And this is something.
Oh, I love that.
This is something where I don't have that level of intuition where it's like something ain't right, because my natural inclination is to do it anyway, right? And that's gotten me a long way, but it's also can get me into hot water, and I've recognized that. And so Heather's kind of the hot water litmus test, like don't go there, you're probably gonna boil up.
That's so cool.
And I'm like, before I'd just be like, oh, whatever, I'll boil, I'll
You're
get
like,
I'll
sure?
get out. Yeah.
I was going. I was there.
Yeah.
That's incredible. She's an incredible woman, and again, just to be a small sort of viewer and part of your journey has been awesome to see how far you've come. So you've got this sort of recruiting business that's almost running itself. Can we talk about some of the metrics as far as you're on the way to building a 9-figure company, very profitable, servicing a ton of different clients, and making a lot of people, like you're helping families and individuals that were there since day one or early on create their dreams and futures. So talk to me about where you're at now and where you're going to.
Sure. We have a lot of big ticket items that are happening right now. So we have a very large treasury war chest of cash that we're looking to acquire. So we're looking, we went through the process of looking at selling the company maybe a year ago. Or looking at acquiring or partnering with a company. And so we work with Deloitte for that. And
how draining was that process?
How draining?
Yeah.
Due diligence is always draining, right?
Sure.
So we've had a couple guys in our forum that have gone through the process. Yeah. It's a pain in the butt, right? And you get inspected at every layer, and kind of feel, even if you're doing things all above board, it still feels like dirty, they're in
a little
there,
bit violated.
Yeah, you feel
drop
violated.
Your pants.
Exactly. You're like, get out of there. Like that doesn't feel good, man.
Good way of explaining it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and through that process, we learned a lot about the market. We learned a lot about our business, and we just felt it wasn't the right time. And a lot of things happened as well in terms of interest rates that dry things up a little bit in terms of the market for acquisitions. So turning the page, now we're looking at acquiring and kind of fulfilling some of those geographical gaps that we have in terms of diversification and customer concentration gaps that we had. So we got some very large contracts with the provincial governments, and a lot of our revenue and business comes from one side of the country from those provincial contracts.
Okay.
And if you're looking at kind of a value of a business, having such a heavy customer concentration for your revenue is not a good thing, right?
Yeah,
because there's
spread out further.
Increases your risk profile. So, over the last 8-9 months, we've been diversifying our customer base, and recently landed a massive contract in British Columbia by bringing in some additional resources into the organization that could help us kind of fulfill that gap. And we've just established our first office and sales function within the United States.
What were the feelings going through? Like, hey, I'm not going to get this, but now I'm going back and I'm going to go acquire. Like, what was the ups and downs of that?
Sure, that's a good question. It's for me, it's a problem again, right? So, kind of emotionally unattached to the situation, looking at just as like what needs to get done to make this business more valuable, to make it more successful, to improve our processes internally, and to make sure that our culture is stable and thriving, and that our people are happy, and that's an ongoing job. And we've been fortunate. You would think that a recruiting company would be able to recruit effectively, right? That we'd be the best at it.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say, we've done a good job, particularly with our technology now. So we use our technology for all of our hires, and it seems to work really well.
It's awesome, dude.
Yeah. And so investors are always looking for what's the exit, right? What's my payout? Am I getting a 50x? Am I getting a 10x? Am I getting a 3x? And so we've got about 35 investors in Workwolf. 4 institutions, so some pretty big institutional investors, and then also a bunch of angel investors and angel groups. And we just had our AGM a month or two ago, and as I was saying to them, the next step in front of us is to get to $1 million in annual recurring revenue for Workwolf. And we're tracking there. And the one piece that we're missing kind of is this marketing inbound lead automation piece. So if anyone listening to this has got some ideas in terms of how to make that, whatever that wizardry is you do on the back end with the tech, we're really strong in every area of our business except that, right? So we're looking to solve that problem right now for Workwolf to kind of get us to our exponential growth stage. We're growing linearly right now, and that's not enough for our investors.
Sure. And
it's not enough to get seed investors, institutional investors for our next round of capital, which will be $4 or $5 million. And once we hit that $1 million ARR, I've got like a stable full of guys that are waiting for us to hit that, to say, okay, call us when you hit that number, and we'll have a check ready for you. So next step is seed. That's probably keeps getting pushed back, but I'd say 6 to 8 months away.
Okay.
And then Series A. And once we hit Series A, that'll get our company to probably 40 or 50 people, and probably an environment where I'll step back from being the CEO and bring somebody in who's got experience in scaling a company from, let's say, 4 or 5 million ARR up to your 20, 25 million ARR. And so I'll step back and probably just take a board seat at that point.
Along the 5-year period, or in those few years coming up,
so
what happens there?
Well, another piece, before I go there with Workwolf, another piece that's really exciting is part of our tech and our digital work passport is the fact that once the information is validated, it stays in this digital repository that is tamper-proof, right? So these credentials that are static, like an academic transcript, for example, background checkers out there today, their business model is banked on the fact that someone's going to change a job every 18 months, and they're going to need that exact same thing validated every year, or every 18 months. But with our technology, once it's validated and in the tamper-proof repository, it never has to be validated again. So you can build the veracity of your resume over time for the duration of your career. And so another acquisition that we're looking at is a background checker. So Workwolf is in the final stages of a purchase of a background checking company.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we've just raised $1 million kind of bridge round to be able to support that buy. and the operational cash that we need to be able to get us to our seed round. And that is super exciting, because to find a background checker, all the background checkers out there are like, you're going to eat our lunch, right? So you're disrupting our business model.
Time and cost is cut in who knows what percentage, but a ton saved for the customer. The top 5 potential clients, like what do you want them to understand about it?
There's nothing scary about it, right? So people use kind of the terms like for natural language processing models, things like AI, right? People don't quite understand what that is, but we've been working on kind of these models and the data science behind this for the last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So this is nothing new to us. And the models help make decisions easier for people. So if you can see inside a person's personality with data that can be read and then filtered, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the roles that's in Workwolf right now, and we have about 175,000 of these digital work passports in market now. Cool. And we had, I think, 480 applicants for this position, and only 15 of them were a 95% match for the psychometric profiling that was required for this position. So you can think of the time saving that you have there.
485. Like, what's the average time to go through a resume for a recruiter or a verifier or a background checker?
7 seconds, which leads you to think, how can they accurately do that, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
They're not.
No, they're not, right? So you got to wonder why so many mishires happen. So what this technology does is it allows filtration to happen much faster, but also much more effectively than an interview. So our use cases are proof in point, where people in play, when they're hired through the Workwolf ecosystem, last longer in their roles, perform better out of the gate, and are a better cultural fit. And that's just from that psychometric piece. But then we also have things like smart resume filters as well. So it can kind of use comprehensive language models to be able to not just search words, but it can detect whether or not someone is saying what it is you need in terms of your qualifications or criteria for your job search. So it's awesome. Here, right? The tech is here, and it's usable, it's commercialized, and it's tested, right? So I'd say the only thing we need, once people try our platform, they love it, right? The main thing is I just need people to give it a shot, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Love that. Something that, this comes up all the time in conversations, but what is the cost of a mishire? Like on average, because you've been in this industry a long time. So when I make the wrong hire, how do you come up with that number? Or maybe just, what is it?
God, like just
30,
ask anyone
20,000, 30,000, 40,000?
At least ask anyone who's done it, right? It's disruptive to your culture, right? So who knows how that trickles down to the rest of the environment and the motivation of the rest of your team that is performing. But, and you'll see kind of all the greats and the influencers out there now in terms of like just how toxic a bad hire can be to the overall ecosystem within a company. So think about this. If you make a bad hire and you pay a recruiter to do it, right? I mean, that's...
Oh, you're paying recruiter. Yeah. You're paying the salaried person. Yeah. You're paying training, onboarding. Yeah. Like, that's why I think, when I've used the number of like 20, 30,000 for certain roles, I think that's entry level and probably low.
Yeah. I'd say anywhere between, let's say, $30,000 and $80,000 in terms of the cost, depending on how senior they are. And you've got all of that time that you spend on somebody, like... our CEO of Stephen Brennan, he comes from, owning and running Xerox, Canada's most successful agency, right? So that was a turnover industry.
Sure.
And, the cost of it's more the investment of time you put in, and you don't want that person to fail, right? It's like bread in managers. Managers don't want a hire to fail. So even though they probably know within 30 days they ain't going to make it, they're going to try everything they can. So they put more effort and more energy into that person just to see them fail 3 to 6 months into the role, when that time could have been allocated to their top 20% of people, where they could have got so much more out of them. So I think mishires, they don't have to happen anymore. With the technology that's out there today, they don't have to happen. You can benchmark your entire sales function. You can look at your top performing your top performers and the attributes that make them top performers. And you can take the attributes that make your bottom performers, and you can use that coefficient to create kind of this golden benchmark for your organization, and then use that to filter against within platforms like ours.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. I'm excited for you, and I know you guys are going to do big things with it. You already are, but how that can scale and become a global, everyday household name. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your take on personality profile assessments, whether it's the Enneagrams, Culture Index, DISC. How does that come into play? And is the technology you have, is it changing that, or are those still a great tool?
It's interesting when you speak to people within kind of enterprise level HR functions, they either love it or they hate it, right? And it's literally 50-50. It's split 50-50, right? So we don't even try and convince people or customers that don't believe in it. We just speak to the ones that do. But the science and the data shows you that it works, right? And it works better than just an interview alone. I don't think it's the answer to everything, but I think that it's a tool that can augment your existing process that will improve it significantly. Yeah. And so, I'm a huge believer in it, right? And, I'd welcome anyone to go to workwolf.com and to try it for free. So the Pack Finder is something that, as a job seeker or as an employer, you can try and test and see if it matches your profile. And I say the best litmus test is to take your results of your profile, give it to your mom or your dad, and give it to your significant other, and see what they say.
Yeah.
And if they're like, "Wow,
oh yeah, this is you,"
this is you. And I haven't spoken to anyone. I've said that to maybe 100 people to try that, and everyone's like, "Yeah, it's bang on."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make sure it's in the show notes after, and a great resource for people.
Okay.
Let's talk about real estate, because you with these little companies you've been putting together, and I mean, you've done incredible there. But you've also had a ton of success in real estate, both as a passion, but something you've done well. Talk to me about that.
So I think it's depending on mortgage rates and depending on industry regulations, things change over time. But I can kind of tell you what I kind of learned from those late night TV shows that I'm old enough to say that I watched, right? Which is, don't use your own money, right? And there's and I still don't like to use my own money, right? If I can get money for reasonably cheap from somewhere else, I'll leverage that money to be able to grow, right?
Yeah. What do the kids say? OPM, other people's money?
Yes. It's true, right? So when it comes to real estate, I started buying condos in my 20s. And listen, if I was a kind of guy who kind of put my tail between my legs, my first buy, I got burnt, right? So on my first condo that I ever bought, it was with, I didn't know anything about developers at that time, or like the big guys like Tridel. So I went with this one developer, and I fell in love with the project, which was, it was right beside the candy factory on Queen Street West. Okay. And it was a remodel of an existing kind of warehouse. And it was a loft, and man, like this condo was like, for back then, it was the ultimate. It was a penthouse, 1 bedroom, 20 by 20 terrace, 12-foot ceilings. Cool. I had it all
sold
modeled.
On the dream.
Oh my God, was I ever? Yeah. And I think what happened is that's when the condo market really started taking off, like 20 years ago, right? And so I think what happened with this developer is they flipped it. Right, they just flipped it to another developer. Probably made $5 million, didn't have to build anymore, and that was it. And what that meant for everyone who had bought is that you got first right of refusal to your condo, but it was at the market price that they set. Right, so my $185,000 condo, 625 square feet penthouse, was now $320,000, which I was like, no, I'm out. Right, so like here's 3% interest on your investment, okay, and screw you.
You didn't let it.
I didn't let it faze me, man. But I changed my model. So I started looking at nice neighborhoods like kind of Young and Bloor, kind of Rosedale Annex area downtown, and buying condos in those areas, but condos that were old and gross. Right, and the grosser they were, the better. Right.
So I want nasty.
I want nasty. Make it dirty, right?
Rodents, birds.
Yeah, there were. And some of these, there were definitely birds. Yeah,
but in good spots.
Yeah, and so I just learned as I went, right? So I hired like drywallers, plumbers, tilers to go in, and then I just work with them, right? So I do my recruiting gig, kind of from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, whatever, and then I'd go and I'd work on the condos until 1 or 2 in the morning.
Oh wow!
And that's how I built a little kind of stable of investment properties very quickly, because I would put $20,000 into the renovation. I'd go back to the bank 6 months later, get it reappraised for another $40,000 or $50,000, and then I'd use the leverage from that new valuation to get a down payment for the next one. And I did that 4 times, right, within a 2-year period, without using my own money, right? And what people fail to realize, they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to buy a property or not. But you think about the return on an investment for a property. Now prices are exorbitant, right? But if you look at, let's say, $1 million property, you got to put 20% down. You're putting $200,000 down, right? But the value of that property typically increases by 10% every year, right? If you look at the trend of the last 25, 30 years. And so on your $200,000 investment, you're getting a $100,000 return in your first year. That's a 50% return. Where
and
else?
Principal pay down.
Yeah, and your principal pay down. So where else are you going to get that? And I think people fail to kind of realize that equation is that you're not putting $1 million down. You're only putting $200,000 down, or you're putting $100,000 down, and you're getting 50% return in your next year. Right?
Where does the market go? I mean, Toronto's now 1,500, 2,000 a square foot. Like, does it continue on? What's your prediction?
It's supply and demand, right? And so I think when square footage in Toronto was $200 a square foot, $300 a square foot, and you looked at the GDP and the economic success of the other competing countries and cities like New York, London, Shanghai, we were so far below them. We had to catch up, right? In terms of our economic success as a country and as a city. And I'd say we're pretty close to where we need to be now in terms of an equation. So I think the gains over the next decade are going to be fewer. But if we continue our immigration policy the way we have, the demand for the properties is going to increase. So it's hard to say, but I think it's going to slow down a little bit. I'm not a real estate expert by any means, but that would be my prediction.
Oh, that's cool. I appreciate your experience sharing that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to talk about vision boards because this is something. There's a couple things that just really land for me on this, and I've been a believer of it. I think a lot of people go it's kind of kooky, or that's Tony Robbins stuff or whatever. But tell me when you started doing this and how that's impacted everything you have. Yeah,
sure. So I think it was 2013 we had our first. No, it was 2012 we had our first company. We had our first company trip. Right. I always love rewarding my people. It's still fun. I really like sharing kind of the success of the organization with the people that make it happen. And so our first incentive trip was to was it Aruba? I think it was Aruba. And there's 4 of us. Right? There's only 4 people in the company, but we took them anyway, right? And so that continued. And so I think in 2013 or 2014, we had maybe 12 or 13 people and went to Deerhurst for a weekend. And we brought the vision board, we brought this stack of magazines. Here's your fitness magazines. Here's your real estate magazines. Here's your car magazines. And we went, here's your Bristol board, go to town, right? And just have a riot. And it was a lot of fun, right? Because you're going through the magazines. How many people
had done that before?
One person. One person had done it before. And it was actually... she was the one who recommended that we do it. So I said, cool. Let's give it a shot, right? And so we did it. And just the exercise of going through the magazines and being silly and looking at it and do I really want that? It's a fun thing to do. And so we did that for a couple of years. And then we stopped doing it at the company, but I continued to do it myself. And there's a couple apps you can get for vision boards. You can put pictures on it and things like that. So I got this app and I did one. And the last one I had done was in 2015. And that was before I had kids, right? That was before I live where I live now. This is before I drive what I drive now. And when I look back at that vision board, And I didn't realize, looking at that vision board, just how long ago I had done it in 2015. But I think the first time I looked back at it was maybe last year, right? And every single thing on that vision board, including the house we bought, is on that vision board.
That was the thing that blew me away.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me, you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we got a new house, and
Yeah.
here's the story of it. And I thought that was, because I think where people miss it is they say like, it's materialistic, it's about stuff, it can easily go there, but it's not about that. It's about
no. If you see my vision board, there's stuff. But there's a picture of a beautiful girl and a beautiful boy, 2 and 4 years old. And that happened too. Right?
It's just the stuff that
and like
really
wake
matters.
up before the sun, which I still have a lot of trouble with, by the way. Wake up before the sun rises.
It's because you're sleeping now.
Yeah, in terms of, before it was like stay asleep until the sun goes down.
That's right.
Or sun comes up. But yeah, I mean, there's things that are important for me too in terms of my spiritual life and in terms of what I give that I think are important aspects that you have, like little mantras you might kind of repeat to yourself, or things that really mean a lot to you that are on that vision board as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful work. I did this exercise with Gabe, my nephew, who's interning this summer.
Yeah.
Right, G-Rock? But we went through and did the same sort of thing, and I stole, I think it was from Colin Collard, of which I still use this day, of breaking your life up into 4 buckets, business, personal, health, community, and family. I think was the other one. That's 5, but anyway, you get where I'm going at. But I said, I challenged him, hey, write down 1 to 3 years. What are some of the things in each of those categories? What would it look like if you could have anything you wanted? And within, I think I gave him 15 minutes to come back. I started talking through, and he's going, oh, okay, well, I could probably do that instead of 3 years. Maybe I could do that this year. And all of a sudden, we literally took, just by that exercise, and we were able to pull what he thought would be 3, maybe even 5 years, to realize half of that list could get knocked off in a year, just from having a different perspective and a different way of looking at it. So I think that's where, the one area of that exercise is so powerful. But dude, to get the house you put on, you literally like found that online somewhere, and now you live in that house. I just think that's so powerful. It's crazy, man. It's beautiful work.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, I want to know, what advice would you give to 30-year-old Erik?
Take care of yourself.
Why?
Because can I do a 10-year-old, 20-year-old, and 30-year-old?
Yeah, man.
Okay. So 10-year-old is learn how to play and make it a priority, right? So you can start to experience some joy in life, because that's something that I did not experience much of. 20-year-old Erik is, buddy, you don't need to squat 400 pounds. You don't need to be the strongest guy, because you're going to feel it when you're 45.
that will come back later.
Yeah. And then 30-year-old is, do yoga, stop hitting the heavy bag, man, because now your hands and your shoulders and your back and everything is really sore. So I'd say, diet-wise, I've been okay, but if you go hard on your body for a lot of years, which I did, you really feel it. And you'll hear that, but you think you're invincible at 30.
Yeah.
Right? And, with that, you kind of are with that mentality, right? It's like, give it to me, I'll take it, right?
Yeah. And you don't feel those things in your 30s.
You don't feel them, man. You don't
40s
feel them.
changes the game, brother.
Sure. Achy breaky, man. So but be kind to yourself, be gentle to yourself. And you guys have kind of told me that too in forum, right? Which is, be gentle. And, something another kind of spiritual mentor used to tell me is he'd say, Erik, you are this tight knit ball of yarn, and every time you get frustrated, you want to rip it apart and figure it out, right? And it's like, you do that, the more knots you get. And he's like, so
great analogy.
You got to tease it apart, right? You got to be gentle with it. And I'm like, I get it, but doing it is another thing for the way I'm wired, right? So there's been a lot of working with coaches where it's like version 1.0 got you this far. Version 1.0 won't get you here. You got to go new, right? Which is, you have to adapt, and you got to change, and you got to unlearn what you think you know and learn something new. And that's what I continue to challenge myself to do.
It's awesome. You before we wrap up, you recently joined a group, and I think it's men specific, and you had an incredible opportunity for a trip. I want to talk about those.
Sure. So I got so much value out of being a part of EO, and now I make time on my calendar for those things that are important. And I thought that having the perspective of another group of successful men, successful not just in the business realm, but also kind of in the spiritual realm, or in the, something's greater out there than just you driving it, right? There's something bigger. And I think deep at our core as a species, we have that longing for like what else is out there, sure. Right? And so that's what kind of drove me to that group. And, through that group, opportunities have presented themselves where kind of the timing was right. And it's like, I'm ready, I can do this. And, there's a group, a charity group called Loving Arms, and I am by no means a spokesperson for them. I've donated some of my own cash and my own time. But these organizations, there's hundreds or thousands. But what I liked about this one is that I went to Guatemala and I worked on the school myself for a week, and I worked on building the house that we presented to the person who, it's life-changing for them, that type of experience. And so I know myself that every penny that I gave goes towards what it is they need. And this charity is unique. I like it because I'm working with them now to make them self-sustaining, because the CEO of that charity right now, she's probably in her 60s, mid-60s, and she's tired, man. She built this school, got the approval from the ministry to get kindergarten and junior kindergarten started, and she's built over the last decade a grade a year. So she now has an entire junior school where there's like 300 kids going to this school, and they have no schooling otherwise, right? So it's an amazing thing she's done, but she's tired. So we're trying to figure out ways, and she's still going out there trying to raise funds, right? Like, can you help us, give us money, right? And that's a hard job. Yeah. So like, how do we make this business self-sustaining, right? So when I was there, I met Jaime, who is like, he's a veterinarian by trade, but he works here at his off hours, and he works there like 8 hours, and he's a vet as well. And he works for pennies, right? This guy, it's almost like a charity for him. He gives back, which is so nice to see. And they had just built a chicken coop, right? And chicken coops aren't cheap. They're like 20 grand, right? But they used the funding to do it. But we looked at kind of dairy farming, cheese, crafts, like how can we bring revenue into this charity? And the chicken coop's where it's at, man. Like the Guatemalans love their chicken. There's like KFC everywhere out there. They call it something else. But so we buy like 1,000 chicks, right? And 10 weeks, and you feed them up, and it costs, I think, $3 in terms of the overall cost. You sell them for like 10 when they're done. So there's a good profit margin. So I'm like, hey, do you want another chicken coop? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm buying you a chicken coop, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How much is a chicken coop?
20 grand.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's
20 grand,
awesome.
but it's sustainable revenue
for these guys. How to fish, right? And I think that's the part that that resonated the most with me. Also, just seeing you, I remember we had a meeting after you came back, and that trip changed you.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to give, right? It always makes you feel good when you give and expect nothing in return. Yeah. Someone said this to me, and I think it's so important because with social now, and everybody just wants to show everyone else just how great they are, right? Yeah. And that's not the greatness, man. The greatness is keeping it a secret, right? And giving something to somebody and telling nobody about it, or being generous or being kind, and keep that little secret with yourself, right? And that's what builds confidence. Going out there, even if you did something great and you don't get the number of likes that you want, you're not going to feel good about it. Don't do that,
We live
man.
in that culture.
Yeah, don't do that. Just to keep it to yourself. Do something amazing and keep it to yourself.
I love that. Whether it's with our team or friends or whatever, I've often said there's, I think we assume that giving is, hey, I've got access to something and I can give you, it's money, dollars, but the stuff that you talked about that really resonated, it's the time, it's the intellect and experience share to say, hey, let's not just buy you a chicken coop, let's, teach you and show you, and let's get 10 in here, and here's how we can do it together. So that's incredible work, man.
Thanks.
I love that. Okay, how do we find your work? I mean, you're not hard to track down. Erik Simins, LinkedIn. Magnus' website is
Magnus, Magnus, HRS, which stands for Healthcare Recruitment Solutions, magnushrs.com. Workwolf, super easy. And then in terms of kind of the design build business that I have under one of my corporations, it's IIE, Architect and Design Group, which is IIEARCH.com.
Amazing, man. We'll throw that all in the notes so people can track you down. And from the bottom of my heart, thanks for being here. I appreciate you.
Love you, buddy.
Love you too, brother.
Yeah, thanks.